Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my February wrap up. I am so excited because I feel like February was such a better reading month than January was. January I read way more books, but February was like good stuff happened. Good stuff happened with reading. So I am so excited to talk to you about these books. Okay, this is later me, literally only like 30 minutes later, because I totally forgot to talk about if I actually read my TBR books. So I'm looking at a list of the books that I have, and it didn't go well. Didn't go well. Let's see. I'm not going to count the stretch goals because obviously that didn't happen. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books that I wanted to read. I read 1, 2, 3, and DNF 2. So half 5. It's because I added a bunch to my TBR like halfway through the month. So like technically my updated TBR did really, really well. But my original TBR, I didn't read The Raven Boys. I didn't read Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I didn't read The Writing Retreat or Georgie All Along. And I didn't read the Last Tale of the Flower Bride. So, but I'm about to show you what I did read, which was really great stuff. And like I say later, it was a great reading month. So enjoy that. First, we're going to go over my DNFs. I did have 3 DNFs this month, which was really sad. But at the same time, some of them were books that I've had on my shelf for a while that I was like, okay, I'm kind of glad like I read it or mostly read it and now it's out of the way. So one of the books that I DNF this month is actually Skin of the Sea, which is super sad because I have 2 copies of this book. I thought this was going to knock it out of the park. But unfortunately, the writing of this book, it's not bad. It's just not for me. It's very, like, lyrical and prosy and very descriptive. And I cannot focus on that type of writing. So I get very distracted very easily. And therefore, I made it through 20 pages. Maybe 40. I might have pushed it to 40, but I made it through not that many pages before I was like, I don't know what's happening. All I know is that the sand is very pretty and the sky is very pretty and the sea is very pretty. And that's all that went in my head during this book. So I was like, this is not going to work for me. I think this will work for many, many other people. I do not think this is a bad book. I just think my attention span does not work for this type of writing. And that was a DNF from the Blackathon reading vlog, which was, again, really sad. I read 2 books DNF to. The other one that I DNF'd in that video was Beasts of Prey. This had a different issue where it's just a really long book. And I got 140 pages, I think, into this one. And it was just so boring. It was so boring that I was just not interested in it. But I can see people actually really liking this book. If you are into slower moving young adult fantasy type of books, you might like this because it does move very slowly the first 120 pages. And it's long. It's like it's almost 500 pages, and I was not ready to slog through 500 pages if I wasn't enjoying the first 120. And the last one that I DNF'd this with only 40 pages left. 40 pages left, which is something. And then I read the ending, and like the ending I actually didn't have a problem with, which is what everyone else had a problem with. But the problem I had was, we'll talk about it in a second. It is Small Game by Blair Braverman. This was promising. I really liked the first 50%. This book is about a group of people who are going to go on a survival show like Naked and Afraid. The author actually was on Naked and Afraid, so she kind of drew from her experience from that. And she said in like an interview, she was always questioning like what would happen if the crew and the cast and crew just left and we were alone here. Like, how would we survive? What would happen? So it's kind of like what this is. Like, they're doing the TV show, and then all of a sudden the crew disappears, and that you have to figure out what's going on from there. So I liked this during the survival part. I actually really liked this during the survival part. The point that the the crew disappears, I was so bored. Like, I thought it was going to be more of like a murder mystery kind of thing. And it was kind of talked about like a thriller. This is not a thriller. This is like a survival story. This is if you like survivalist things, if you like Naked and Afraid, I actually would suggest that to you, but this was definitely marketed to the incorrect group of people. I would have finished it because it's a really short book, and like I said, I powered through it. I got the audiobook on Scribd, and I was listening to it at like 1.8 speed, which is as fast as I can ever listen to anything, and I was getting through it, and then there was animal deaths towards the end of it that were brutal, and I was like, I will not dignify this finishing this. It's clearly written by someone who does not have a problem with animal deaths, because it's definitely in the mindset of someone who has probably had to kill animals to survive. So she gets it. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with it. I just wish she hadn't created a bond and brought up the animals prior to killing them. Like, one of the animals was brought up a few times through this book and then was killed. And then one was almost like a pet and then was killed. So I DNF this. Because I don't want to see this on like my red shelves, because it just gives me really, really bad vibes. So this is going out of my house pretty much the second after this video ends, because I was that upset with the animal deaths in this one. So if you are any bit emotional about animals, hard pass on this book. Okay, we are now on to the books that I read. First, we're going to talk about, we're not going to go in any order. Normally I go from what I read first to what I read most recently, but we're just going to do whatever's in the stack. And first, we're going to be talking about the audiobook / Kindle book that I read, because I don't buy his books because I don't like them. I rage read this because I liked the first one. I liked 90% of the first book, and then I hated the ending. But because of the ending being like almost like a cliffhanger, I had to read the second one, and then the same thing happened. I loved like 80% of the second one, and then that ending, I was just like, come on. But the book that I'm talking about is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. I liked this one better. I liked the overall story significantly better. So the first one has to do with a girl who's in high school who thinks that a new cycle of a slasher is being born, and she's trying to warn who she thinks is the final girl that she's the final girl and she has to stop all the murders from happening, etc. She's got to kill the killer. So that's what the first one is about. The second one takes place 10 years later, 7 years later, because something happens at the end which causes a time lapse that you have to, maybe it's only 4. Might be only 4. I don't know. There's some amount of time that passes between the two because of the incident that happens at the end of the first book. So the second book begins with our main character again, but this time there's another new slasher, but they're not like the main characters this time. Now they're trying to help the new high schoolers who are now in the position they were in the first book. And I liked it so much better because the first one promised a slasher story, and it wasn't really. It was more about our main character. This one is definitely character-centric as well, but it was a straight-up slasher. It was a straight-up horror slasher, things going on, some very icky moments, some very like, oh my gosh moments. My problem with Stephen Graham Jones is I don't like his writing. It's very like stream of consciousness almost. So sometimes I get completely lost. Sometimes I'll be reading and I'm like, what? what just happened? I gave that one a 2.5, and I would say it's like a higher 2.5. I think I gave the first one a 2. So they're not like that different. I did love the idea of this one significantly more, and I liked the plot line significantly more, but it's still just, the writing killed me. Still gonna read the third one. Still gonna hate read the third one. Let's talk about the first book, and that is The Davenports. I do have a little bit of tabbing. It's not like extreme tabbing. It was just a couple quotes that I really, really enjoyed. I read this one for Blackathon, and this was my favorite book that I read for Blackathon. It was amazing. I give this 4 stars. It is following our family, the Davenports, which is based off a real family called the Pattersons, which I didn't know. That was really cool. And it takes place in 1910, and the Davenports are a very wealthy Black family living in a predominantly white area. I think they're in Chicago. They're fighting for civil rights, etc. But her family kind of has taken a step back because her father was a slave and he doesn't want to get directly back involved in all of that because now he's free. And mostly he's supporting the Black community because he's putting a lot of money into businesses and hiring a lot of Black people. So he doesn't want to be involved in the civil rights movement, which causes an issue because her romance is a civil rights leader. So that's the kind of like main plot line that's going on through this, but there's 3 other storylines that are also like romance / finding your way in this world. One of them is her sister who wants to be a mechanic for her father's company, and she has a romance kind of thing going on with her sister's other suitor. And then you have Olivia's best friend, what's her name? Ruby. And her whole thing is trying to but she's trying to get Olivia's brother to marry her, but other things are happening. And then we have Amy Rose, who is works in Olivia's household and her family's household, and she wants to become a hairdresser and open her own shop, and she also has some like a romance thing going on. So it's a big romance book, but it was a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a fluffy young adult romance because when I read reviews, people's complaint was that it moved too quickly and it was kind of insta-lovey. I did not agree that this was fluff. It very much went into the civil rights movement. It very much went into people trying to make it on their own. It very much went into how Jim Crow laws were creeping up into the North, which I didn't know because my history class didn't teach anything about the North. They didn't teach anything about the North relating to the era at the time. So they just pretty much said once freed people got to the North, everything was fine, which was not. This book did a great job of explaining what was going on. So I loved this book. I thought it was incredible. This is the first book in a series, and I thought it ended really, really well. To me, it was going insta-lovey because I think it's really hard for 4 main characters to fall in love and get engaged in one book. That's a lot. And it went in a way that made it not insta-lovey, and the next book is going to expand more on the relationships. So I think it's going to be really, really good. I cannot wait for the second one. So yeah, it's also, if you just want like a quick little thing, it's basically better Bridgerton in my opinion. I didn't love the Bridgerton books, so I thought this was better, and I would love to see this as a TV series. I think this would be really good as a TV series. Okay, the next one that I read was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I actually read this for Sid Bookworm's book club on her Patreon. I will be having a reading vlog coming out for all of the book club books that I mentioned in this video, plus more that I haven't gotten to yet. I got really behind this month in reading towards the end of the month because I started having pain and stuff, so it got a little difficult to read, and it still is a little difficult to read, but it's getting a little better. But anyway, went super out of my comfort zone when I picked this up. I've had this for a while. I cover bought this one. A lot of people were talking about it, and I was like, I'm just gonna get it. And it's been on my shelf ever since. So I'm really glad this was her pick because I finally got it out of the way. And you know what? I enjoyed my experience with this. I gave it a 3.5. It's a high 3.5. It's not necessarily what I like. I don't like time travel in stories, and the main storyline of this is time travel. It wasn't as bad with COVID as I thought it was going to be. So this is basically following a couple of main characters along this is a hard one to explain, along a timeline. And the only thing that's similar along the timelines is there's this weird anomaly of this violin music playing that they all hear, and it pops up in history. And our main character is a time traveler who has to go back and is trying to solve the anomaly. And it does take place slightly in a pandemic in the future, but I thought it was going to be significantly worse. It was not that bad. There's only like one section that talks about it significantly, and it really wasn't horrible. I thought it was going to be significantly worse, but the ending was phenomenal. I would highly suggest this just because, number one, it reads super fast. Number two, the ending of this was so good. And that's why I said 3.5 and not just a 3, because I did start getting bored during this book, but that ending was definitely worth it, which is why I say it's a strong 3.5. The next one that I read was also a pick for Sid Bookworm's book club, although I guess Sea of Tranquility wasn't the book club, it was the buddy read, but I'm still counting that because it's basically a book club. And then this was like the actual book club pick, and then it was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This is the Fairy Loot edition, which is I mean, it's stunning. It's stunning. I love it. And this was a 5-star. This is a soft 5-star. It's not like, I didn't end the book and I was like, 5-star, this is amazing. It was like, it's a 5-star. Like, it's a cozy fantasy that's got a little more action, I would say, in it. And it took me about 100 pages to get used to the writing, though, because it's written in a journal format. And the main character is very serious and very rigid, and her writing got a little annoying. She's very intellectual and researchy and stuff, so she was the main character for most of it. And then once the other character, Wendell, shows up, who's fun, flighty, all over the place, her writing started loosening up, which was actually really cool. It turned out to work very well because you could see her change throughout the book through the writing. So the author, Heather Fawcett, wrote as if she was this character, which worked actually incredibly well. And this was such a cute book. I actually really, really loved this, and I definitely stick with a soft 5-star. But if you don't know anything about this book, it is a very different take on a book about the Fae, and she is a researcher. Emily Wilde is a researcher of Fae, and she goes to this like northern town where she thinks there are people called like the hidden ones that no one's researched before, and she's trying to make an encyclopedia of all the Fae that she comes across. And Wendell, her partner back at school, wants to join in, so he shows up unannounced, basically. Well, he announces himself, but she doesn't really think he's going to show up, and he shows up and he's like, hey! But she talks to Faye, and they're very different and interesting from other books, and it's a very good take on them if you want a more traditional look at Faye. Like I feel like this is not the Holly Black Fae. Holly Black Fae, where they're more human-like and they act more human. No, these Fae are definitely otherworldly, kind of evil, some of them, and they follow their own rules. So it was really, really good. Okay, I was gonna talk about this one next, but I'm gonna save it for last because it was my favorite book this month. So we're gonna put one aside and then continue on with Wildblood. This is the other book that I read for Blackathon, and this is bad. It's got a 1.5. This was really bad. And I'm so sad because I have already read a book by Lauren Blackwood, Within These Wicked Walls, and it was a Jane Eyre retelling, but it was insta-lovey. It wasn't written very well or compellingly. There was parts of it that I liked. I think I gave that one a 3 because there were aspects of it I really enjoyed, just not the romance. And the same thing happened in this one. The book was so good up until about the last 100 pages. Was so good, except the romance was absolute trash. It was so insta-love. It was like being smacked in the face. It was so insta-love. So this one was a huge disappointment. And then the ending was just terrible. It was terrible. And this was a very violent book. I would not recommend this to anybody, to be honest. I actually will not be picking up another Lauren Blackwood, which is really sad. I hate putting authors on that list of like, I can't pick up another book unless I see significant improvement in like the Goodreads reviews. I can't waste my time on another one because this is the second time I've been disappointed in such a good premise and it's executed so poorly. This one hurts. This one really hurts me, and I love the cover is so pretty. It's so pretty, and I love the idea. The next one that I actually read for an Owl Crate read along, and I was shocked. I was shocked that I ended up loving this book, and it is Heart of Iron by Ashley Poston. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I gave this was another soft 5-star. Again, didn't like, oh my god, but so good. And I honestly just can't believe how much I loved it. This is making me feel like I'm actually a sci-fi girly, and I need to read more sci-fi because I feel like every sci-fi I've been reading lately, I've actually been really enjoying. So I bought the second book as well. I haven't started it because I had so many other books to read, but I really enjoyed this. And this one is following our main character who is a rebel kind of person. Like think Han Solo. She's part of a group of people who are basically all Han Solos, and they get into trouble, etc. But she gets into more trouble because she's trying to save her android friend more than friend, because his like body is dying and they need a new like body to put him in, his soul or his circuitry or something to put in. So she's trying to do that, gets into trouble, meets up with a prince, and no, the romance is not between her and the prince. I was shocked about that. There's actually really, really good LGBTQ relationship in this, which is so nice. This book just generally shocked me about how much was in this, how good it was, how cute it was, how, like, I cried multiple times to this book. I just cared so much about the characters, and I loved it. I really, really loved this book. The next one that I read was for, if you haven't watched it yet, I don't know what you're doing, Wheel of No Appeal, episode 2. I ended up spinning a yellow spot, and it was The Lost Apothecary. Yikes. I talk about in that video how I originally had picked it up and then put it down and never picked it up again, which is why it's a yellow space. Should have never picked it up again. I was right the first time. This got a 2-star. Hated the ending. There was some, like, part of this book was really, really good. Oh, the ending. What is going on with these endings? I feel like these authors don't know how to write endings lately, and I'm just struggling. Because the rest of the book, I'm like, oh, having a good time. And then the ending strikes, and I'm like, what? What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? So, yeah, this is another one where the ending struck and I wanted to rip my hair out. So 2-star. This one's following 2 main characters. One is an apothecary back in the day, and she helps poison bad men. And then the person in the current day is dealing with a infidelity issue with her husband. She goes to London by herself, and she discovers a apothecary bottle, and so she starts researching into the apothecary person from long ago. So it's both stories. It's interesting, and then just fizzles out at the end. The next book that I read was a huge surprise because a lot of people really didn't like this book. This got a 4.25 because it'll hinge on whether it continues, because I can see a lot of people had an issue with this because it's marked as a standalone. It's not really a standalone. The author came out and said that she is writing another book in this world. So it is possible, and most likely we're going to see the characters in this in the next book, but in a smaller capacity, and then hopefully a third book that brings like everybody together and more closure for this book. But it is Monsters Born and Made. I loved this. I thought this was so good. It is I think it says it's like a mix between Hunger Games and etc. And 1000%. If you want a book that made you feel the way that Hunger Games did, yes, I loved this. But it takes place in this, like, I would say almost post-apocalyptic world. I would say, yeah, it's dystopian, but I would say more post-apocalyptic-y, where there's a clear divide between the rich and the poor. The rich live in like this underground area where they don't get attacked by monsters all the time, and the people who live outside get attacked by monsters all the time. Like, there's sirens and everything, and people are straight up massacred, and it is wild. And so her family are hunters, and they actually catch these monsters for the rich people to ride in these like championship games. So she manages to find her way into a championship game so she can win money for her family and to help her sister who's really, really sick, but only the rich can afford the best of everything. So her sister's pretty close to death and she needs this medicine, and it's basically just a big competition where she has to ride something called a maristag, which are super like wild and may kill you if they decide like spur of the moment to. Like, they're crazy. I loved this so much. I had such a fun time reading this, and I'm so glad I ignored the ratings because the ratings are really low. I think people thought it was too fast-paced, which I loved, and they thought the ending wasn't satisfactory. I liked the end. Again, it's definitely a 4.25 unless it wraps it. Like, if there's another book and they talk about the characters in this one and kind of wrap up the romance a little bit better, because the romance was the one thing that was left hanging if you don't like that kind of thing. But if it's brought up again and it's kind of resolved, it'll get a 5. I'll change it to a 5. So that's kind of just like sitting in wait, seeing if the next book comes out and I enjoy it. So I really like this one. And this is the Bookish Box edition. I don't get Bookish Box, but I really wanted this book, and it was not that expensive on Mercari. So I ended up getting a copy off Mercari. Okay. And the last book that we're going to be talking about, my favorite book that I read this year and some of last year, actually, and it was my biggest surprise because I don't like this genre. I don't generally like this type of writing either. This was I can't even explain how big of a surprise this was. Alone with You in the Ether, 5-star. I cried, I laughed, I screamed while reading this book, and so many people don't like it. So many people don't like it. And I cannot tell you how in love I am with this book. I love this book so much, and I plan to reread it at some point pretty soon because I love the characters. I love them so much because I've never read characters that felt more real and more like they are actually dealing with problems that are serious, but it's not like there's not like a made up issue that they have to get over. It's like real problems, real things going on. They have to deal with their own issues because they both have major problems. And then, oh my God. Okay. First, before I talk about that, the book is following our two main characters, and it literally says a love story. It is following Aldo, who's got some sort of societal awkwardness. Something's off there. They don't exactly say what it is, but he doesn't talk to people very well. He's very blunt, and his sense of humor is very dry, and he doesn't get jokes a lot of times. So he's very like that. So people don't get along with him very well. People think he's mean because he'll just ask questions. He'll just be like, he'll ask like the most inappropriate questions because to him, nothing's out of bounds. He doesn't get that you can't ask certain things. And then on the other hand, we have Reagan, who is dealing with being bipolar, and she hates being on her medication because it stifles her creativeness. And she's very self-destructive, has to deal with awful parents. Oh my God, her family is terrible. Like, oh my gosh. And it depicts both people's situations so well. And I loved them so much as individuals. Even when they were at their absolute worst, I loved them so much. And they brought out a side of each other that was just phenomenal. And then I was a little concerned because we started getting to a point where Reagan goes off her medication. And I was like, this is suspicious. However, I now have a greater understanding of bipolar disorder because Olivia Blake has bipolar disorder and she is not on medication. She was for years, and she basically wrote Reagan very similarly to herself, where she was going through a lot of self-destructive phases where she felt like she was being stuffed into a box with this medication, etc. And she does talk about it. She's like, I'm not on medication, but I have my therapist and my husband watch me very closely and will give me warning signs if I'm about to go manic, all this kind of stuff, so she can manage it. But she channels her energy and her, not episodes, but channels her just energy into writing. And that's why she writes so much. That's what she talks about. She's like, I just write. I write, and it keeps me balanced. So, and she says, some people need it. Some people need the medication. Some people need other types of outlets. It's a good therapist is what will help you get you to that healthiest point in your life. So she talks about that, and I was like, because they portray bipolar people in media as these terrifying people that if they're off their medication, they're psychotic and they can't be controlled and they're gonna burn a house down. And so that's all I know about it. I don't have any friends that have bipolar disorder. I don't have anyone who's even close to having any issues like that. So I loved reading about it, and this, especially that the author has the issues that she writes about in the book, because I feel like it's just such a better understanding of what bipolar disorder really is. So I love this book. I loved this book, and it is an all-time favorite. And I got the Waterstones edition, again, from Mercari, because ordering Waterstones is so expensive. So some editions that aren't super popular, like this one because a lot of people were like, a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people DNF'd it. I was able to get for like $25 free shipping. So that's way cheaper than ordering from Waterstones, which is like $40 a book with shipping. So anyway, I loved this. I love this. So yeah, that's what I read this month. I am so excited. I absolutely loved everything. Well, mostly everything. I feel like I had a really, really good reading month. I found some new favorites. I had 3 5-stars this month. 3, almost 4, depending on if that other book comes out. Amazing. Literally amazing. I had such a good February, and I really hope this energy continues. This really good reading energy continues into March. I'm currently reading Legends and Lattes. I was supposed to finish that yesterday or 2 days ago. Didn't happen. So I'm currently working on that. That should have been in the February recap, but it's going to be in March. But I'm loving it. I'm loving everything that's going on right now and having a great reading time. And I hope you guys are too. Make sure you subscribe to see more content. Make sure you like the video and make sure you comment down below what you thought about any of these books, if you've read any of them. Whatever. I love talking to people, so have a great time in the comment section. So I will see you guys in the next video.